The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is Anna Schallenberger, Continuing Ed Chair for the Competitive Intelligence Division. I'd like to welcome you to our monthly webinar series. This July, we're fortunate enough to have Peggy Garvin, who is sort of the guru of gathering government information. And as it is the month of our independence, I thought this would be a perfect month to schedule it. So just a little background on Peggy before we begin. She earned her MLS at Syracuse University and is an independent info consultant specializing in U.S. government information and publishing trends. She also focuses on helping other info pros make the most of government info in their work. She's authored a number of books, which I will post a link to her that you can see, and has been also very involved in the Government Information Division, as well as some of the local chapters, AAIP. And finally, she was presented with the Dow Jones Leadership Award in recognition of her service. In lieu and to leave more time for Peggy to chat, I will turn it over to her now.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone, and thanks for the introduction. You may have noticed in that brief bio of mine that I'm not a CI practitioner and I'm not a market researcher. I'm more of a Washington person. So I have to thank Ellen Naylor, who is an expert, long experienced CI practitioner. Whoop, why am I not forwarding? Okay. Have to thank Ellen Naylor for this particular slide that she kindly lent me so that I could understand the intersection of my world with your worlds. What she's got here is a basic list, a cloud of the type of information that you may gather as open source information, public intelligence. You gather it passively. It's not in interviewing people. Not going further with the analysis, but just what is out there for you to harvest. And you can see that we have the legislation and regulations, and of course politics. Those are all very closely related to each other. I should draw a circle around them. And then of course there are a lot of other types of government information here. The deep web, a lot of government information is in the deep web. That's why it always pays to know the sources as well to get into the information that you need. Gray literature, that's government information, public records, patents, trademarks, press releases, scientific papers, but we're going to focus on legislation and regulations and to a certain degree politics. This other slide, this next slide, I also borrowed from Ellen Naylor of Business Intelligence Source. She calls this the collection continuum. And what I've done is take her slide and then added those little blue boxes. So this is the collection continuum as I see it for legislation and regulatory intelligence. Starting at the bottom, at the base, we have the government documents, the bills, the legislation, the regulations, the proposed regulations, those basic documents, as well as what's really important is the status of those documents. Is this a proposed regulation? Is this bill sitting in committee? That sort of thing. So status and document are key for legislative and regulatory intelligence. Moving up the ladder, Ellen calls it social intelligence. What I put here is expert analysis. This is going to provide you with context. This is going to tell you, in effect, here's what this one section of this bill will do. Put it into plain English for you, and then maybe take it further. There are a lot of free sources in this area, in the expert analysis area, from blogs to news reports, and the agencies as well can provide information, particularly on regulatory action. And then there are some more high-priced commercial online services. BNA has always been a favorite. It's a high-quality product. I don't want to be plugging a particular product, but Bloomberg BNA is a prime example of what would be considered expert analysis. there are other firms that specialize, like Thomson Reuters, in government risk. That again is expert analysis and provides more value up the chain. But at the top of the ladder, we have the human intelligence, HUMINT, and what I put there in quotes is political intelligence. It's a phrase that has come up, I think, just in the past year, political intelligence, as a way for people who used to be called lobbyists to define themselves, saying, you know, I do political intelligence, I don't need to register as a lobbyist. So it really stands in for lobbyist or the member's best friend or someone who is talking to the staffer. That's the kind of information that you can get in the legislative realm. Or in the regulatory realm, you're having meetings with an agency before a regulation is even proposed because you know someone or you know about it. So that's the political intelligence. That can give you a lot more information about intent and about odds of whatever is in question moving forward. Sorry. Okay. Now, monitoring federal legislation. There are a lot of guides to federal legislation. I'm going to take you back a step and just give you an overview and then some more context to it. You may have heard recently, in the past 4, 6, 8 years, talk of transparency in government, open government. I have been following this from the get-go because, you know, it gets me excited, not because I know what sort of effect it's going to have on government or, you know, on my taxes or any other reason, but because I hope that it brings a lot more legislative information, regulatory information out into the open, where I can search it and where I can get more documents and basic public intelligence. And in fact, that's really been happening. It's been good. The opacity part of the equation is that, as a number of people have found, as a meeting becomes transparent, perhaps it is now webcast live and there's an archived version, as a certain type of document becomes public, the real action may move further into the back room. That's just something to know about, to say I've heard this whole meeting or I've read the transcript. That's part of the equation, but there may be more human intelligence to get still from the back room. Okay, the other thing is that the product, the legislation, is really shaped by the process itself and ultimately by politics. And I don't think I'm surprising you there. The process part just means that you really do have to understand the legislative process because for political purposes or for the purpose of winning or shaping legislation, the process is used. It is used very well. And what sort of parliamentary maneuvers are taking place, how a bill is brought up, that sort of thing, is very important to understanding where that piece of legislation is, what its importance is, what its chances are. It can tell you a lot. So understand the process in order to understand the meaning of the legislation. Okay, there are lots of guides to the legislative process out there for you, excellent guides. The Library of Congress runs the Thomas.gov legislative system. They point to excellent guides, and I'll talk about some of those later. The House and Senate also have excellent guides to how a law is made. But I think that you and I are beyond the how a law is made civics class stage. And so the real world becomes a little bit more important, what really happens. In fact, the bill doesn't move along the hill all that smoothly. I like this first quote, legislation is a shapeshifter. I stole this from another librarian who works with legislation, and it just, you know, even though I've been working in this area for, I don't know, 25 years or more, the fact remains that legislation is a shapeshifter is sort of the best description for tracking legislation and the best phrase to remember when you're trying to find out what happened to my bill, what happened to this provision. It's the fundamental way that things move forward, that provisions move forward, that legislation moves forward. To give you an example, you may be tracking HR 2, House Bill 2, because it concerns your industry or your market, House Bill 2, and all of a sudden action on House Bill 2 stops. You're not hearing anything. What happened? Most likely, either the bill has just been set aside or died, but it's also quite likely that the text of the entire bill, the language of that bill, has been cut, copied, pasted into another bill with a different bill number. And now that is the go-to bill for you, HR 23 instead of HR 2. It may just be your provision of interest, provision that has to do with registering cows in the United States or something like that. That particular provision may be plucked out and moved somewhere else, somewhere where it may have a better chance of passing. So the key point here is language, is what we always call it, the text of a bill, the legislative language. Language is portable. At the end of a Congress, all bills that have not received any action or have not been signed into law go away. The next Congress starts off with a clean slate, so everything that happened in the past is just gone. But members may reintroduce a bill. There are bills that members reintroduce every Congress. And inevitably, you want to find out in the 114th Congress, where did my bill on marine mammals go? What you can do is search unique language from your bill and find it in the new Congress. So it's the key is the language. Find unique phrases in the bill, and also the sponsor. Check and follow the sponsor. And finally, I just want to say, I know in competitive intelligence, you're really trying to find out what's going to happen. You're tracking this federal legislation because you really want to know, will this be affecting our industry next year or 5 years down the road? Well, the problem is that politics do come into play, and it's not always predictable. Quite often it's quite easy to tell, yes, this bill is going forward, no surprise, this is a must-pass bill, etc. The President supports it, Senate supports it, the House supports it, not controversial, no problem. But for many things, it's not so clear-cut what's going to happen. And I think with this Congress, which we all know is a little unusual, the House is, even the experts can be surprised. This happens with any Congress. There's always going to be something that's going to surprise even the House leadership. To have the Speaker of the House be surprised several times is very, very unusual. So it just goes to show you that unusual things can and do happen. My examples here, the headlines that I provided for you, I don't want to be partisan here, but these were recent examples, and they were some of the best recent examples that really surprised Washington. And I would like to keep them in my head so that I don't get too confident about thinking that a particular language or particular bill is just going forward.
Peggy, it's Anna. I'm going to jump in here for just a second because we may be having a few technical issues on our end, and I want to do a quick process check.
Okay.
We will be taking questions at the end, so please do submit them. I was going to post something about that in chat, but there seems to be a problem with chat. So don't worry, we will unmute you guys later on, and there will be the opportunity to ask Peggy plenty of questions. So just wanted to get that quickly said in case there were any issues with anyone trying to submit questions. There will be plenty of time and allocated to that. So Peggy, back to you.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I will be open to questions, and all of this topic we could study in a college course, but we just have a few minutes here. So with legislation, we had the official sites that you may well have heard of. Thomas.gov is the Library of Congress database of federal legislation. A new system is coming online called Congress.gov, which is still considered a beta.congress.gov. The Library of Congress expects the beta to drop out of Congress.gov very soon, maybe by the end of the summer, if not sooner. Thomas.gov, they plan to retire at the end of this calendar year. So Congress.gov is getting to be my first go-to. That didn't happen last year. It just wasn't ready. It didn't have the content that Thomas.gov has. And at the same time, I still check both because I'm just not sure when they're moving new content to Congress.gov, just so you know. The great thing about Thomas.gov, Congress.gov, they're both drawing on the same basic data. Thomas.gov gives you bill status information as the bill moves on. Where is it now? And it links out to votes, to documents that relate to the bill. So it's really your legislative history with document links for a bill. That is one of the areas they seem to still be building on Congress.gov. So don't assume you're getting everything quite yet. Thomas.gov also has excellent legislative process guides. They have 9 videos up on the legislative process, so give them a whirl. But with these official sites, both Thomas.gov and FDSys, which is the government printing office site, they don't have alerts, they don't have customization. They can't help you all that much with monitoring. I inevitably turn to the Thomas status information because that is key to find out where it's been, but it won't alert me to what's coming up. And I, from what I've heard, the alert feature will not be coming soon. They would like to add an alert feature, but that's nothing I'm counting on anytime soon. FDSys.gov from GPO, this is a document repository. There's no status information, you have the documents without context, and there are no alerts, no customization. But this is the official repository for documents, and you'll definitely need to use it. Okay. So here's where our brave new world of civic hackers or citizen developers come in, or the young whippersnappers, I call them. GovTrack.us stepped in to fill the void. It's a free, unofficial website that provides alerts. And for that reason, it's very popular. It caught on first with journalists, and it's just used around the world now. Makes it very easy to track a bill. This is their particular display of information on one bill. I cut and pasted different sections. There's a lot more information that they provide on a bill. But you can see there's a button, track this bill, share it on Facebook. You can also see at the bottom, I cut several sections. It says view on Thomas. I love this because, like I said, I always want to go back to Thomas and see what they have there. So this is one reason that GovTrack is acceptable to me as a non-official site. Citation for those scholars out there. It gives you a quick and easy way to find out what the site is. And then you see prognosis. And this is very, very experimental. So I would take this with a very large grain or rock of salt. It's just based on an algorithm, and it's based on the past. So it's interesting, but I wouldn't count on what the prognosis says in GovTrack. They do like to experiment with things. Okay, start tracking on GovTrack. You can track a keyword, you can track your company, you can track a product. You can also use the preset trackers. For example, if you want to be alerted each week about what legislation might come up for that week, what committee meetings are coming up, what new laws are being signed. Josh Tauber, who runs this, has preset trackers as well. And at the bottom of there, you'll see state legislation. On the homepage of GovTrack, you can click to go straight into databases of state legislation. More and more, some data has got out in open source, and so there are more free sources of searching across state legislation or zeroing in on one state and searching that state for any development. And since Washington is a bit gridlocked right now, there is more state legislation coming up that's relevant for you. But look for that, govtrack.us on the homepage. There's a link to searching the states as well, and that also has a tracker. Okay, Scout. This is another young whippersnapper, another civic hacker web developer from the Sunlight Foundation. They've done a lot of different products. Scout may be the most useful for you. Scout searches, as you see on the left, bills, speeches in Congress, so this is the spoken text in the congressional record, state bills, that's the same database pretty much as Josh has on GovTrack, federal regulations, GAO reports. So keep in mind you can do alerts on federal regulations here as well. But I'm searching bills in Congress. I searched for the word Monsanto because there was some controversy about something people were calling the Monsanto bill. Okay, Scout turns this up, even though when I search in Thomas or I search in GovTrack on Monsanto, I can't find anything because that word is, that company name obviously is not in the bill itself. And this is where some of that social value added comes. The new web developers who are taking government information and reusing it, developing their own products, are often building in a comment feature or other social features, and that's more information for you to mine, more words to search on, can be quite helpful. In this case, Scout points to the 3 main free sources that track bills. Congress.gov, that's the library system, GovTrack, and Open Congress is another one. Open Congress does pretty much what GovTrack does. They have a little bit more of a tilt, they have more editorial blog, but Open Congress is also a good source. And I can show you why Open Congress is here and why I was able to find the bill that people called the Monsanto bill. OpenCongress.org serves as an intermediary. There are a lot of places like this where you put your comment through OpenCongress.org and they'll send it on to your representatives in Congress, and then other people will read it as well. But that explains the language of some of these. And here is where people, because it's plain language, mention Monsanto, and I turned it up. So I just mentioned this as an example of some of the new social content that's coming on that's really helping us find things more easily, using the words that we might use in the normal English language and not trying to think of how would this appear in a bill or in a law. And of course, HR 933, I think that might have gotten incorporated into a larger appropriations bill. So that again could illustrate the point that you've got to follow the bill and not necessarily the bill number. Okay, official sites of the House and the Senate do have good information, particularly this House, the 113th Congress, has made a lot of breakthroughs in providing new information online. So those of us who just want more information are thrilled. They have something called docs.house.gov, which comes from the leadership. In the House, the leadership pretty much runs the show. They always say that the House rules are designed to pass bills, Senate rules are designed to stop bills. So the leadership pretty much runs a House in a normal Congress. They post weekly, they've always done this for insiders, what legislative activity they expect. This primarily has been in the past, so members know when they need to be in town for votes. But it obviously has a lot of value for everyone else. And what it will do is tell you what's coming up on the floor and link to the current version of that bill. That also is very valuable because before it gets introduced, it may not have a bill number. It may be a previous draft, something like that, or you may not have seen what that bill actually looks like. This makes it very easy to see, is my bill coming up and what does it look like? You can get alerts to committee meetings, and there's a committee document repository that they're really trying to grow. With a lot of both congressional and federal agency information, we tend to think of the government, but it's much more like 100 million cats that you're trying to herd. So committees are like that. If you want committee information, you can go here, but you may also want to go directly to the committee site. Committees can be excellent for background information as well, although the quality of their information lately has been more partisan, declining in value. Okay, House Rules Committee. The House Rules Committee, if you're going to track legislation, and it's legislation that's got to go through the House Rules Committee is it. This is extremely important. In your How a Bill Becomes a Law class, you learned that the bill went into a committee, and there the committee amended it, marked it up, came up with a version they all agree on. or the majority agrees on, and they pass it, and then it can go onto the floor of the House. Well, in between those two steps, it goes through the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee can and has taken a bill that the chairman of the committee has signed off on and strike all of the text, all of the language, and insert a completely new bill. So the Rules Committee is where some major changes happen. Fortunately, they are more open than they have ever been before. They webcast their meetings. I follow their tweets. They tweet whenever something key is going to happen. They're infamous for meeting at 2 a.m. in a very small room. So it was more the reporters who had to, sleep there overnight. But now it's much more open, and it's essential if you're following some major legislation. Senate.gov. Senate is infamous for being a little bit slower on the tech side, but linked from their homepage, they have several excellent resources. There's what's coming up on the floor, and what committee activities are coming up, what committee hearings are going to be held or meetings are going to be held. And then a gem, absolute gem called Active Legislation. That's a link from the homepage that the Senate Library has always put together. It used to be sort of a marked up cheat sheet that they kept next to the phone when staffers called and said, what's the bill number for this? Quite often people ask for something in plain language like, what's the Monsanto bill? Or what's the farm bill? This active legislation guide, and it's good to look at it today because it will show you what it's done for the farm bill. You don't have to know what the formal name of the bill is. It's under Farm Bill, and it'll show you the Senate bill number, and it will show you the House bill number. The first House bill failed, so it's got a strike through, and a new bill number was just assigned yesterday, and it's on there. So you can see how your shape-shifting legislation morphed to another bill number and different text. Okay, so we're going out of the legislative maze and into the regulatory jungle here. Regulations are part of the body of federal administrative law, and I excuse me, anyone who already is very familiar with this, just a little background. Federal administrative law encompasses a lot of different types of activities and documents and proceedings. It basically is agency law. Executive branch agencies have been given authority to make law or make decisions, either because it's granted to them in their authorizing legislation or because Congress has delegated it to them. For instance, for Dodd-Frank, Wall Street Reform Bill, they may say they're delegating the authority to write those regulations to the SEC or to some other body, and they in effect become law. There are administrative decisions. These are quasi-legal bodies. Another one in the news lately, National Labor Relations Board is an example. They make decisions in labor disputes. Executive orders and other documents from the president are also administrative law. They tend to be, executive orders tend to be the regulations for inside government. Like, now we must all use recycled paper, or now we must all have an open government section to our site. Okay, the federal administrative law, no one knows all of it. It is extremely varied. Every agency is different. It is specialized, it's technical, it's down to that very specific level, and it can be difficult to find, again, because it's spread out everywhere, and because it's obscure, they just don't make the connection as much to, everyone would like to see our findings. So there are a number of great sources that I've listed here where you can get help. The Archives Office of the Federal Register is excellent for explaining to you the Federal Register and the regulatory process, as well as executive orders, and linking to where you can get those. The second bullet I have here is LLSDC.org. That stands for Law Librarians Society of Washington, D.C. If you haven't been to their website, definitely go to it and look for the link to the legislative source book. At that legislative source book, you will find exactly the guides you are looking for to find legislation, to see what's going on with bills, to find out where you can get a 1984 hearing, where you can get a 1972 House resolution, that sort of thing. It's got guides that are just excellently prepared. I'm highlighting here a guide to federal administrative law, which again is excellent, and they also have a guide to where these documents are on free and commercial systems. So definitely, if you haven't checked it out yet, take a look at llsdc.org and click on their legislative source book. Okay, and finally, the University of Virginia Library has been kind enough to maintain through the years a list of links to each agency's administrative decisions. There are some commercial services that put these together as well, like Westlaw. It will list all these agencies and give you links to their decisions, their FOIA processing, anything else that's related administratively to the agency. So that's definitely another go-to source. Okay, here's something that made the news lately, and I'm glad because otherwise it's just really, really boring. The semi-annual Unified Regulatory Agenda, full name Unified Regulatory and Deregulatory Agenda, and et cetera, et cetera. So we just call it the Unified Agenda usually, and it is where you want to start in monitoring regulations if you want to know generally what's going on in an area. Agencies, regulatory agencies, are required to publish their plans for regulations, proposed regulations, for the near and the long term, all within the upcoming 6 months or upcoming year, and to give you information on that. It's an attempt to herd those cats and make a lot of the regulatory plans standardized, and attempt to make sure that two agencies aren't attacking the same problem, that sort of thing. And you'll see I have here the for the Energy Department, the titles that they are working on, the titles of the regulations that they plan to work on, I should say, and a regulatory identification number on the right, a RIN identification number. That gets assigned to everything that's mentioned in the Unified Agenda. But all regulations do not have a RIN number. So if it has a RIN number, that's a great way to search on it in official databases and to track it, but not everything has one. Okay. This created an uproar because when this came out, it comes out every 6 months, but an uproar this time. Some people made an issue of, look at all these regulations they're planning. The thing to know about the Unified Agenda is just because it's on here doesn't mean it's really going to happen this year. Regulations are scotched, regulations are withdrawn. So take it with a grain of salt again, but this will give you a much better idea of what at least somebody is considering. But don't think this means they're definitely going to propose regulations in these areas, although the odds are much higher than anything else. Okay, another go-to source, RegInfo.gov. This is run by the General Services Administration, RegInfo.gov. Do yourself a favor and take a look at their RegMap, their map to the regulatory process. The standard way regulations are made is through notice and comment rulemaking. This is the rulemaking process that uses notice in the Federal Register and the ability for anyone to comment to the agency about that pending regulation or rule, and possibly have some effect on the final rule that comes out. There are many steps. I could only fit a few here, 4 of them here, but you want to pull up the full map, and it will show you both what documents come out of the process as well as what's happening behind the scenes in terms of regulatory review and other conditions that have to be met. Okay, as far as official sources, reginfo.gov is one, but for tracking, what's wonderful now is that with the Federal Register, you don't have to go to some other unofficial source to get the 2.0 type features like tracking or customization. The official FederalRegister.gov site is great. As you see, it has the customization, it has some alerts by email or RSS. You can track things by search term. Here I tracked beer. Just searched on beer to see what was going on. You could track by agency. You could track by industry or controlled list of topics. So there's lots of things you can do with it, and I would definitely recommend exploring this. It is, as you see, very easy to use, bright and colorful. It's not your typical government website. What they did, what Federal Register did to their credit, is work with those civic hackers, those open government people, and encourage them to develop products from their data and work with them. And so what's happened now is the early pioneers who developed a private product was called GovPulse. The Federal Register took the best of what they had done. This is a very cooperative effort. So instead of having this bifurcation between official non-2.0 type site and unofficial 2.0 type site, you have a 2.0 type site with FederalRegister.gov. Okay, the public inspection desk, I mentioned the unified agenda in terms of looking ahead to what's happening. That's looking ahead to a bit of a longer term. The public inspection desk is an old-fashioned term used before it all came online, because there was an actual desk that you had to go to. But what it is a listing in text of documents that agencies have filed that are going to appear in tomorrow's Federal Register. So you can get tomorrow's Federal Register today. It's not going to be the complete Federal Register, and different agencies contribute at different times, but you want a heads up about what regulations are coming out tomorrow, you can get it here, or when your reg is coming up. And you can also do a saved search on this, or a tracker on this as well, with RSS or email. Special filing, regular filing, you might see listed there. That doesn't really mean anything legally at all. That's just a matter of when you need to when your agency needs to turn it in to the public inspection desk for purposes of producing a print product or an online product. Regulations.gov is the other official site. In the notice and comment process, the FederalRegister.gov does the notice, and Regulations.gov does the comment. This was pretty revolutionary. Usually comments on regulations would come from interest groups or Washington lawyers, and they would get in a cab and deliver it to the respective agency. Now you can comment online. Anyone can comment online. It was always open to everybody, but it was obscure. So now you can comment online, and you can see what people are saying about your particular bill or your particular companies or your particular market in relation to that, I'm sorry, regulation. I said bill, regulation. You can also see everything that is in the regulatory docket in many cases. In some cases, you don't see the full docket, but you can see documents that you couldn't get to before. If a special study was done in order to assess the need for this regulation and develop the language, that may be in the docket as well. I love this one. I picked this one because in the comments, this reflects the fact that it's now the public commenting here. Just says it takes a phone call from one psycho, and then the agency comes in. So you will see both unwashed public and sophisticated comments. I talked about opacity and transparency. This is another area. It used to be that people really didn't see what comments law firms and interest groups were making on the regulations. So they may state things differently. Now that it's open, we may be seeing, I'm not sure this is happening, I'd like to find out, but we may be seeing those insiders go back to delivering in print or delivering directly to the agency, and because that just slows the whole publication down. People won't be able to see their comments as quickly. But that's just my theory. Okay, Regulations.gov has been very open in working with the hacker community. There is a site called Docket Wrench from Sunlight Foundation that searches the comments on Regulations.gov, and it gives you a nice list of what agencies are not included in Regulations.gov, either because they are exempted, they're not relevant, or for some other reason they're not included in Regulations.gov. So that's Docket Wrench. I don't particularly like it. A lot of the weak points of these Citizen Hacker 2.0 sites is the search is not particularly powerful. They may have fielded search. The official sites tend to have faceted search and maybe more powerful search, but search is often the weak point. Okay, Bloomberg Government is also building its commercial product on Regulation.gov. There's a entrepreneur doing this notice and comment website, and it's meant for citizens. And you can put your comment there, and it promises to send it on to the agency. So you can search other people's comments and look at them too. Okay, so free sources, pay sources. There are so many sources for getting background on the bills that everyone is paying attention to. You can use everything I've told you for the more obscure bills, because those databases cover every single bill. But for the bills that everyone has to deal with, like the healthcare reform or like Dodd-Frank, there may be special sites that are built just for you. This one is from the St. Louis Fed, and they have an excellent tracker for Dodd-Frank. There's a law firm, Davis Polk, Washington law firm, that is working, representing some of the people involved with Dodd-Frank in the financial industry, and they also have a page up about Dodd-Frank and what's going on. This is free. Somebody else has already done and is already doing the work for you. Similar site for legislation. This is from Colorado State, a site called Advanced Energy Legislation. A specialized research body within Colorado State got a grant to do this, and so they are tracking at the state level alternative and advanced energy topics. So again, here's someone doing the work for you. Okay, and I threw this in because I didn't want to ignore it, but federal advisory committees, these come up in the ladder almost to the degree of human intelligence. If you can get yourself on a federal advisory committee, you may get an insider's look at things. You may learn more than you usually do. GSA, General Services Administration, runs them. If you work with FDA, Food and Drug Regulations, you're probably very familiar with advisory committees. But this website here is a great way to find them and to find whether they do put up their minutes or their agendas or their reports. So that's just something else I want to mention as an important area of agency information. Okay, finally, another slide from Ellen Naylor, Business Intelligence Source. She's a CI practitioner. And I like this because here's government out here on the outer loop of the external information spiral, but it's still there, and it really will depend on your agency, how heavily regulated it is, or your particular topic, whether it's something that is inspiring current legislation. But there we are, right, with ex-employers and suppliers and customers and others, the government. And that's it. So I thank you very much, and we can take questions now.
Sorry, let me get myself off mute here a second. And Peggy, great presentation. Hopefully all of you have enjoyed this and have some questions to submit for us. We did have some technical issues, so unfortunately I was not able to post some of the links while Peggy was talking. However, if in the chat, however, if you go to the CID Twitter feed, I have posted some of them there, including registration links for our next session. Peggy, one question that did come in already was asked if you were searching for information for other purposes than regulatory risks assessment. In other words, how do you use this information? What are some of the applications in people's own work that they, and I know you're not a CI person, but based on your client questions that you think they might have.
Right. You know, this again is why I used Ellen Naylor's slides and talked to her, and I've been to a few sessions to educate myself, is I do live in this Washington bubble where I'm not working with industry very closely. I'm working with the people who are working with the policy. So we're a very, very special clientele. But risk is a major thing, and it doesn't have to be risk. It could be reward as well. It can be contract potential. I'm told that the immigration bill, if that goes through, or if certain border enforcement provisions go through, that's going to be a gold mine for a lot of the companies that are in the Homeland Security business or defense tech business. So that's another reason you would follow it, is for opportunities.
Oh, great. And we've got a number of industries that are relevant to our folks. I'm just pulling up the questions now. One area, as you know, that has a lot of members is pharma. And I'm
Right.
curious if you have any tips there, because that's so highly regulated and it's covered. But I know, having done pharmacy I myself, that there's always that time lag issue in terms of, what can we get while it's still sort of fresh? Any tips in that
Mm-hmm.
area?
Well, this is, I think, what I
And I would, oh, Peggy, I mean, sorry if I can
yes.
interrupt. I would make that broader rather than just being medications, to include medical devices,
Bio.
biosimilars, whatever else falls into
Okay,
that. Yeah.
sure. Um, this is why I had that image of the regulatory jungle, because each agency is very different. And I know whenever I have pharma people in my audience, they are very smart and they know exactly the FDA process and where they can get information there. Because pharma is a thriving industry, global industry, there are a lot of resources from the free to the very expensive that are available to you. As far as any sort of thing about, when you want to know, get the information when it's fresh, that either is because someone's doing an excellent blog or newsletter, um, or you have that human intelligence. You have somebody that you can call, or somebody that's going to alert you. Another resource that I don't work in the pharma area, so I can't guarantee, but the law firms who have a lot of pharma clients may have extra information for you.
Okay.
They
And but
law firms are really beefing up their websites to be information providers as
well,
well.
that's great. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, we are going to be continuing these in 2014. We'll have some info about that for you. But we want to focus on Peggy's questions, but we will hope to dig into some of these specific industry pieces, whether it's healthcare, legal, or whatever. So, Peggy, I'm going to, we've got a lot of good things coming in, and I'm going to kind of at a high level, so the folks out there know I picked up their questions, tell you what the buckets are, and then throw the questions out to you one by one.
Mm-hmm.
We've got interest in state level monitoring, international level monitoring. A quick throwaway question: RSS feeder. Do you have a particular preference on RSS feeder?
um, you know, that's one of those things like, okay, if only I could think of the name of it. I haven't switched. And actually, I've gotten away from doing a lot of RSS feeds. I'm a major Twitter user. And that
Okay.
may shock some of you.
Well, if you think of it, we have started a discussion in
Yeah.
this guy
Oh,
LinkedIn,
I know
which
what
I
it
will
is.
post to the Twitter, and
Yeah, I
people
think
can
it's
look
Dig.
there.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
Dig that recently came out with a feed product.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, and I'm going to go back to the international and state in a moment, because I know those will take a little bit longer. Are there
Mhm.
any of the sources that you tend two source questions? Do you use for historical sort of retrospective looks? And are there any free sources that you particularly like, particularly in the healthcare area, for example, related to the healthcare exchanges?
Mm-hmm. Um, the first one, retrospective. Government Printing Office has some retrospective, does go back some years, and they're working on building out their statutes at large. This is the text of laws has passed to cover the whole period of the United States. But Hein Online is just an excellent product. It's not free; it's a commercial product. And
For the historical, you're saying?
yes, yes, and that would be my first go-to. I like the guides that are at the llsdc.org source book. I mentioned it's on one of my slides, because they have guides to where you can find regulatory and legislative documents, and they will go back different years, so that if you're looking for that hearing from 1974, that's not going to be on Nexus or on the House website, things like that. That's a good go-to place to just see where they are available.
Have you,
The other
just out
question,
of curiosity, have you found the C-SPAN video library helpful at all?
um, I have not had to use that, and it maybe I just need to get more into the habit. I think it's an excellent source, though, and I know that um, I do some training for people at think tanks, and I know that they use it heavily. It tends to be the younger people that are a lot more video oriented um, who think of that as a go-to source. The House pretty much has really come up um, a long way in providing live webcasts and archives of their hearings and events. So, like I mentioned, the House Rules Committee. So every House committee now will have their committee meetings webcast. The House also puts the live floor coverage online, and I do use those. It's interesting, of all my apps besides weather, I also use the White House has an app for live events, and I've used that before. When I'm at an airport and I can see that the president is speaking, but I can't hear it in the airport, I'll turn that on. So that tends to be a go-to for me in terms of video. But usually, when I'm listening to it, something live, not archival.
Okay, and I do want to point out before I pose these next couple of questions to Peggy that Peggy's deck will be. We would have posted this in the chat if that was working, but Peggy's deck will be available at the end, and I know she plans to add a few things that come up in conversation to the deck. So we'll end up hitting all of these things we're talking about. Peggy, since we're beginning to run low on time, I want to basically throw out three questions. First one's, and then I'll let you run with it so that you can have plenty of time to talk. First two are comment related. One individual wants to know how much regulation comments affect the outcomes, and another individual wanted to know where people are submitting those searchable comments in Open Congress. That's the first two-parter, but also, and I think these could be their whole own sessions if we can get you back some point, or you can refer someone. But we would love some recommendations either for tips or sites on international government monitoring and for state as well.
Okay.
State and local.
Okay, I think I've got this now. Let's see. The comments in Regulations.gov, and how much do those affect the outcome? What I've heard from the agency specialists that go through these comments is a lot of them are just not helpful. This is by the time something reaches this point, Congress has already passed a law that's been signed into law saying that there will be regulations coming forth on this. Not all regulations come out of a law. There can be agencies may just see a technical change, or there's some new some new technology on the market really changes our need for regulations on certain things. So there are agency originated regs as well. But by the time it gets to drafting the regulations, it's at a fairly technical level. I'm just thinking back to the Americans with Disabilities Act and everything that came out of that. It gets down to how wide is this aisle going to be, or what is the turning radius here. Some of it may have to do with chemical reactions, or what's the level at which this kind of material is going to burn or not burn. So it gets very, very technical. What I've read about Dodd-Frank is that outside voices, and this is not the citizens sending in through Regulations.gov, but again, the major law firms and lobbyists, the human intelligence people, political intelligence people, are meeting with staff at these regulatory agencies and saying, you can't do this. You can't put this regulation forth like it is, even before a regulation is proposed. So if you have the technical knowledge, if you have the clout, you most likely will have a lot more influence than someone who just writes in and says, I don't think we should have bicycles on the street or something like that.
International.
Yes, international. Oh, and someone asked where you submit comments via opencongress.org. The site is very easy to use. I'm sure you first have to register. It's free, but when you want to use any sort of personalization feature, of course, you need to register and get a login. and then you can go ahead and use it. PopVox, P-O-P, V as in Victor, O-X, is another tool quite like it, and I would use that instead. It gets comments. It's designed by a former staffer and working with Congress and developing it. It gets comments to members of Congress that are the way they need to ingest it. Congress has had just so much trouble with the proliferation of email that is not on legislative topics or isn't from somebody in their district, et cetera, et cetera. PopVox is a good system for that, for making sure your comment gets to the right place and in a way that the staffers can deal with it better.
Now, is that PopVox with a B or with a B?
V as in Victor. You know, it's like Vox popular.
Yeah. Okay.
P-O-P, V as in Victor, O-X.
Oh, P-O-P-O-X, no V.
I'm going to type this in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peggy.
There you go.
Not to pull you away, but think global for us for a moment.
Yeah. Again, you know, I'm upfront about my limitations. I don't do much at the international level, and my interest is mostly in what's developing in terms of technology in the legislative area. There's just an active global community coming up with better legislative systems. But you're probably interested in tracking international farmer regs and that sort of thing. And all I can say is that I imagine there are some high-priced services out there for you, but for someone to track those regulations globally is going to be work. It's going to be a lot of work, and so you may well have to pay for it.
Sounds like another webinar opportunity for us here.
Yes,
how about
for someone else?
How about state and local? We've got a few minutes here left, and I want to leave a quick time to close here as well. So let you get to the state stuff, state and local.
State and local, and I'll throw in international here. The Library of Congress Law Library, loc.gov/law, has a guide to finding the law online, and they have links to state and local websites as well as international websites, and they have a lot of international law information that can help. I also showed you GovTrack and Open Congress, which for the first time have brought really easy, free state searching online. Other than that, for the state level information, look for the association that handles that topic at the state level. For
instance, an example might be NASS, the National Association of Secretaries of State. Right. Okay.
And NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures, tends to do 50 state type surveys and state trends on particular topics, big topics. So NCSL is another one. In the area I track, which is more the information technology, there's a National Association of State CIOs, Chief Information Officers. So I would go there if I'm kind of looking at what sort of policies are they developing for social media, that sort of thing. So look at the state level. We, as you know, we in the United States have an association for everything. And it may well be international. It may be regional. The same sort of thing may exist at, the chapter level, local level. So that's my first take.
That's great. Are there any closing thoughts you want to share with the group before we wrap up here?
I appreciate their feedback. It's always interesting for me because I am dealing with non-policy people. You're the people who are working more in the commercial information, and I'd appreciate hearing what was most useful.
That's great. Thank you so much. So again, as I mentioned, we were having some issues with the chat. I do want to reiterate that in a few days you should be receiving an email with a link to the deck and to the we have one last question, sorry. Is there a site that speaks on major bill issue points in layman's terms? I think they mean layman's terms. So other than what you were talking about, where, for instance, the Monsanto bill example.
I haven't looked at those lately. There used to be something called Citizen Joe, and that was great. Citizen Joe, like Joe.
Okay.
But I don't know if they're still around. GovTrack is attempting to do that with their summaries of bills. The Commercial Research Service has to provide a plain English summary of every bill that's introduced, and that's not a commercially viable activity, so you want to go to the government for that. And
Right.
CRS does that, so you'll see that on Thomas, the summaries. Those are absolutely essential to me, the summaries and the status on Thomas.
Okay, so you would say probably LOC then for that, is your
Right, for those summaries.
uh, and by the way, if for any of you who don't know, there is a LOC feed you can subscribe to that you get, sort of new reports and things they put out. It's really excellent. I'll tweet a link for that later. And to that point, since the chat was not working, I have posted most of the links, and we'll post some more that you guys would like to see or that we've discussed here to the SLA CID hashtag. And I do want to mention also that in that you will see a link to our next 3 webinars, including the most immediate, which is August 22nd with the ever excellent Craig Fleischer. He will be covering proven analytic methods, practical analytic techniques for info pros. So I highly recommend that. I do not want to let the session close without thanking our wonderful, great, always helpful host, Aurora, and their initiative Intel Collab. You will see in that same Twitter feed a link to their sessions as well. They have some excellent free sessions you can attend. And if no one else has any further questions or anything else to add, I will close with, we were happy you were here. Please keep in touch, and we are always looking for volunteers, be it to present or to participate in our group. Thank you again, and we will now close the session.